The Dralethian warship Molten Vengeance cut through the void like a blade of dark metal and molten steel, its angular hull radiating the dull orange-red glow of its plasma cores. High Commander Draltal stood motionless on the command platform, his segmented armor plates shifting with each measured breath. The bridge hummed with the deep industrial growl of Dralethian machinery, a sound like a distant forge, relentless and unyielding. Before him, the holographic display flickered with data streams, 1,000 points of light representing the known galaxy. And yet, one signal pulsed in the void, an anomaly. Vashdor. Draltal rumbled, his voice like grinding tectonic plates. Explain this. The scientist, his copper, accented cranial ridges twitching in unease, manipulated the display with clawed fingers. The signal resolved into a pattern, ancient, unfamiliar. It is not one of ours, Vashdor admitted. Nor is it from any recognized species within the Accord. Draltal's mandibles flexed in irritation. The Dralethian Dominion had ruled this sector for centuries, their brutalist warships enforcing order with molten fury. Nothing should have been unknown to them. The signal repeated. A distress call, but not just any distress call. It was old, impossibly old. Vashdor's ocular lenses dilated as the translation matrix completed its work. High Commander, this signal originates from a dead system, one that was purged long before the Dominion rose to power. Draltal's armored fingers curled into fists. The Forgotten War. A myth, a legend, a conflict so ancient that even the Dominion's archives spoke of it in fragments. A war against a species so reckless, so unrelenting, that the Accord had erased them from history rather than risk their return. The signal pulsed again, weaker this time. A single phrase, repeating in a dead tongue. No one else would come, so we did. Draltal exhaled, his internal furnace flaring with unease. A myth should have stayed buried, and yet the void answered. Far beyond the Molten Vengeance, where the stars grew thin and the dark stretched endless, something stirred, something woke. The command deck of the Molten Vengeance hummed with the low grinding resonance of Dralethian power cores, their molten conduits pulsing like veins of fire beneath the ship's armored plating. The air shimmered with heat haze, casting an amber glow over the angular consoles and the dark segmented forms of the crew. Draltal stood motionless before the hololith, his armored carapace reflecting the flickering orange of the display. The distress signal, that signal, still pulsed in the air before him, its waveform jagged and ancient, like a wound that had never fully healed. Vashdor adjusted his ocular lenses, the copper filaments embedded in his skull whirring as they recalibrated. The translation matrix had done its work, but the words it had unearthed were impossible. High Commander, Vashdor said, his voice a measured rasp. This signal predates the Dominion's founding by millennia. Its encryption protocols are archaic, but its origin point is unmistakable. Draltal's furnace. Heart thrummed in his chest, a slow, deliberate pulse of molten alloy. He knew the coordinates before Vashdor displayed them. A dead system, a graveyard, the Forgotten War. The Accord had scrubbed it from the archives, purged its records, buried its remnants beneath layers of sanctioned silence. But some things could not be erased entirely. Some horrors lingered in the dark, waiting. The humans, Draltal said, the word heavy with implication. Vashdor's mandibles twitched. A myth that just spoke to us. The hololith flickered, and the signal repeated, its cadence slow, deliberate, as if the voice behind it had all the time in the universe to be heard. No one else would come, so we did. A warning, a declaration, a promise. Draltal turned his gaze toward the void beyond the viewports, where the stars stretched thin and the dark yawned endless. His sensors registered nothing, no movement, no energy signatures, just the cold, indifferent expanse. Something was out there. The Molten Vengeance's long range augers had detected no fleet, no vessel, no sign of life. But the silence itself was wrong. The void did not answer distress calls. The void did not stir for ghosts. Unless the ghosts had never left, Vashdor's talons tapped against the console, summoning archival data. The Forgotten War was not a war of conquest, he murmured. It was an extermination. The Accord deemed humanity too volatile, too unpredictable. They burned their worlds, shattered their fleets, erased their name from history. Draltal exhaled, his furnace flaring. And yet, here we are. A chime sounded from the tactical station. One of the junior officers stiffened, his carapace plates shifting in alarm. High Commander, long-range scans detect mass displacement. Something is emerging from the dead zone. The hololith flickered again, its projections warping as if reality itself resisted what was coming. Then, no, not a shape, a presence. Angular in ways that defied Dralethian engineering, its hull segmented like the carapace of some ancient predator. It moved without propulsion, without the telltale flare of thrusters or the shudder of warp displacement. It simply was, as if it had always been there, waiting for them to see. Vashdor's lenses dilated. That is not a ship. Draltal's furnace pulsed once, hard, and it was opening. The command deck fell into a silence so absolute it seemed to swallow even the hum of the molten dawn's core. Draltal's furnace burned low, his internal heat sinking into something colder, something like dread. The thing in the void was not just a ship, it was a statement. Vashdor's talons clicked against the hololith controls, his lenses flickering as he parsed the incoming data. The scans returned in jagged, fragmented bursts, as if the vessel itself resisted observation. What little they could decipher was enough to send a ripple of unease through the bridge crew. The hull was layered in segmented plates, dark as void, forged iron, but with a texture that shifted under scan like living tissue. No, not living. Adaptive, the material drank in sensor pulses, dissipating them into nothingness, leaving only ghostly impressions in the data streams. Energy readings? Draltal growled. Vashdor hesitated. None. No reactor signatures. No plasma trails, no waste heat. A ship that did not burn fuel, that did not bleed energy, that moved without propulsion. Impossible. A flicker, a single, pulsing anomaly deep within the vessel's core. Vashdor magnified the scan, his lenses narrowing. There, a power source, but it doesn't match any known technology it reads like. His voice faltered, like a contained singularity. Draltal's furnace flared. A black hole, harnessed, a weapon turned into an engine. The hololith shuddered, its projections distorting as the unknown ship's systems activated. Then, light, not the harsh, industrial orange of Dralethian plasma, but something colder. A pale electric blue, pulsing along the vessel's angular grooves like veins. The bridge crew recoiled as one. That light, that color. It was wrong. Dralethian optics evolved to perceive heat, to see in the spectrum of molten metal and burning stars. This was something else, something alien, something that hurt to look at. Vashdor's voice was a whisper. Draltal's claws flexed. Shields. Unaffected, whatever they're using bypasses them entirely. A new alert chimed. A proximity warning. The hololith flickered, then resolved into a new image, smaller shapes detaching from the main vessel. Dozens of them. No, hundreds. But not like any Draltal had seen. They moved in perfect, silent formation, their angular frames cutting through the void, like blades. No engines, no exhaust, just motion smooth and relentless, as if the vacuum itself yielded to their passage. A transmission, raw unfiltered data slammed into the molten dawn systems, bypassing encryption, firewalls, every layer of security. The hololith convulsed, its display warping into jagged, indecipherable symbols. No, not symbols. Human script. Vashdor's breath hissed through his vents. "They're speaking to us." Draltal stared at the shifting text, his furnace burning cold. The galaxy had declared humanity extinct, and yet, here they were, not pleading, not negotiating. The hololith's jagged human script pulsed like a living thing, its meaning indecipherable, yet unmistakably intentional. The transmission wasn't a request, it was a command, a demand for acknowledgement. Draltal's claws flexed against the command console, the metal groaning under his grip, his furnace, core burned low, a primal instinct warning him of predators circling in the dark. Across the bridge, Vashdor's ocular lenses flickered rapidly, his neural tendrils twitching as he parsed the data. The scientist's usual arrogance had bled away, replaced by something colder, fear not of the unknown, but of the known, of the stories whispered in the dark about the species that had once defied the galaxy's oldest empires. A new alert flared. The human fighters hadn't just detached, they were moving, not toward the molten dawn, but past it, arcing in perfect formation toward the orbital docks of Dralethian Prime. Draltal's vents snapped shut. They weren't here to talk. They were here to land. The human dropships hit the atmosphere like falling stars, their hulls glowing white, hot before shedding the heat in shimmering waves. No clumsy retro, thrusters, no roaring descent, just controlled, silent precision, as if gravity itself had been commanded to kneel. From the observation spire of the High Forge, Draltal watched, his thermal receptors flaring at the unnatural sight. The humans should have burned. Their ships should have shattered under the strain of re-entry, yet they descended unscathed. Their angular silhouettes, cutting through the smog, choked sky of Dralethian Prime like blades. Vashdor stood beside him, his neural tendrils coiled tight. Their thermal dispersion is impossible. No species manages atmospheric entry without energy bleed. Unless, his voice faltered, unless they've mastered quantum absorption. Draltal didn't answer. His gaze was locked on the lead vessel as it touched down in the center of the docking yard, its landing struts barely disturbing the soot-covered ground. The other ships followed, forming a perfect circle, a perimeter. Acclaim. Then the hatches opened. The first human to step out was a woman. She moved like a blade, unsheathed, fluid, deliberate. Her armored exosuit, a matte black that drank the forge, light of Dralethian Prime. No helmet. Her face was bare, her dark skin marked with faint scars, her eyes scanning the assembled Dralethian enforcers with the ease of a predator counting prey. Behind her, more humans emerged, soldiers, but not like the ragged militias of the old records. These were forged things, their armor segmented and reinforced, their weapons humming with contained energy. One, a male with a face like fractured stone, carried a rifle that pulsed with a deep rhythmic thrum, like a heartbeat. Draltal's furnace, core stuttered. He had seen war. He had led fleets. But this was something else. The woman stopped a dozen paces from the Dralethian line. She didn't speak, didn't raise a weapon. She simply looked at them, her gaze lingering on Draltal as if she already knew him. Then, slowly, she lifted a hand, not in greeting, but in presentation. A holoprojector embedded in her gauntlet flared to life. The image it showed was a star map, marked with burning sigils, Dralethian colonies. Vashdor made a sound like a dying reactor. The woman's lips curled, not a smile, but a baring of teeth. And then, at last, she spoke. A single word, translated through the hololith's shuddering systems. Section, Fey. The door opens. The silence that followed the human's declaration was not the quiet of hesitation, but the stillness of a predator coiled before the strike. Draltal's secondary heart thrummed against his ribs, molten blood surging through reinforced veins. His neural interface flickered with threat assessments, each more dire than the last. The humans should not exist. They could not. The Great Purge had erased them from the galactic records. their homeworld scoured to bedrock, their fleets shattered in the void, and yet here they stood, clad in armor that breathed, their weapons humming with a resonance that made his own plasma conduits shudder in dissonance. The holomap between them burned brighter, sigils flaring like supernovae over Dralethian holdings. Homeworlds, Vashdor's claws scraped against the deck, his vents hissing steam. This is impossible. The human woman, Shepard, her armor's sigils declared, tilted her head. The motion was too smooth, too controlled, not organic, not entirely. We heard that a lot before the fire started. Draltal's tactical subprocessors raced. The humans had no fleet, no infrastructure, no right to be here, yet their armor bore the scars of combat. Deep, jagged furrows where Dralethian plasma should have vaporized lesser species. Their weapons were not crude ballistic relics, but monstrosities of hybrid tech, their barrels ribbed with containment coils that pulsed like living things, and their eyes by the forge. Their eyes were the worst. Shepard's gaze held no fear, no hesitation, only a cold, calculating fury that made Draltal's instincts scream. This was not the look of a desperate survivor. This was the stare of something that had waited behind her. The male soldier Lee shifted his weight. His rifle's thrum deepened, its muzzle flickering with unstable energy, not a plasma charge. Something worse. Draltal's neural net flared warnings, unknown weapon signature, energy readings matched theoretical annihilation, core destabilization, a suicide weapon, and the human held it like it was routine. Shepard took a step forward. The Dralethian line tightened, armored plates locking into defensive formation. She didn't react, didn't flinch, just tapped her gauntlet. The holomap twisted. New sigils ignited. Fleet positions, Draltal's, core temperature spiked. The human ships weren't hiding in the void. They weren't lurking in asteroid shadows. They were everywhere. Clustered around Dralethian supply routes, orbiting undefended outposts, drifting just outside weapons range of the Dralethian, his flagship. How had they gotten so close? Vashdor's voice was a static-laced whisper. Their signatures, they're masked, not cloaked, mimicked. Shepard's teeth gleamed in the dim light. You left us in the dark for centuries, she said. We learned to see in it. The deck beneath them trembled, not from engines, not from weapons, fire, from something deeper, something older. Lee's rifle whined to full charge. The door to hell creaked open. Section Fey. The first log, the deck plating groaned underfoot as the vibration intensified, a deep, resonant hum that bypassed auditory receptors and instead thrummed directly through the marrow of Draltal's bones. His thermal receptors flared, not from external heat, but from the primal instinctive reaction of a predator sensing something far larger in the dark. The humans had not simply arrived, they had awakened. Shepard's gauntlet flickered again. The holomap dissolved, replaced by a grainy, age-worn transmission, a relic from a dead era. The timestamp burned in the corner of the feed, its numerals archaic, its format obsolete. Earth standard date, Fey. The image stabilized. A human face, gaunt and hollow, Aid filled the frame. His uniform was patched, singed at the edges. Behind him, the skeletal remains of a command center flickered with dying lights. Draltal's neural interface automatically parsed the dialect, pre-collapsed Terran, a dead language. His translator spat out the words a half-second later, but the meaning was already clear. The man was dying, and he was laughing. If anyone's listening, the transmission crackled. The human's voice raw. This is Captain Elias Varga of the UNS Resolute. We're the last. The Dralethians hit Earth 12 hours ago. The orbitals are gone, the cities are glass. But they missed one thing. A shuddering breath, a wet cough. They missed the dark. Static swallowed the feed for 3 full seconds before the image resolved. Again, the humans' teeth were red. We rigged the old lunar shipyards, buried them under the Mare Crisium, automated. No crew, no signatures, just waiting. His grin widened, a rictus of something too sharp to be despair. You burned our homes, killed our children, thought you'd erased us. The feed distorted, the human's face pixelated, his eyes burning through the decay. But you forgot one rule of war, you molten, blooded bastards. A final shuddering breath. No one buries us but us. The transmission cut. A new sigil flared on the tactical display. Not a ship, not a fleet, a structure. Vashdor's neural spikes fired in erratic bursts as the scans resolved. His voice, when it came, was the sound of a scientist realizing his life's work had been built on a fundamental error. Luna, he whispered. They moved Luna. The hologram zoomed. The moon's cratered surface peeled away like a shell, revealing the jagged, angular horror beneath, a nest of dormant shipyards, their berths empty. Shepard's voice was soft. You glassed Earth, but Wed already left. Lee's rifle cycled to standby. The sound was obscenely loud in the silence. Draltal's tactical feed updated. The human fleet, their real fleet, wasn't just surrounding his outposts. It was emerging from the shattered remains of their own dead world, and every ship bore the same designation, stamped in bleeding crimson text across their hulls. Unes Vargas promised the silence on the Iron Fist's bridge was absolute. Draltal's claws flexed against the command console, the dark metal groaning under his grip. His tactical display pulsed with the impossible, Luna's shattered shell, the hidden shipyards beneath, and the fleet now pouring from them like blood from a reopened wound. Every ship was identical, every ship was wrong. The Vargas promise. The name meant nothing to him, but the implications burned like molten steel in his veins. Humans were not extinct, they had hidden, and now they had returned. Vashdor's neural spikes crackled with overloaded signals, his mind racing through the implications. The scans were undeniable. Luna had been hollowed out, its core replaced with a labyrinth of shipyards, their berths now disgorging warships in perfect, synchronized formation. This was not salvage, this was preparation. The humans had known. They had known the Dralethians would come, had known their home would burn, and they had let it happen. The thought sent a shudder through his exoskeleton. What kind of species sacrificed its own cradle to lure its enemies into complacency? Colonel Shepard watched the Dralethian commander through the holographic feed, his posture rigid, his molten, orange eyes flickering with something she recognized all too well. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of their mistakes settle into the bones of every Dralethian on that bridge. Then she spoke, her voice soft, deliberate. You thought you erased us. Lee shifted beside her, his rifle still humming at standby. The sound was a promise. You didn't. Draltal's tactical feed updated again. The human fleet wasn't just emerging, it was positioning. Not around his outposts, not around his ships. Around him, the Iron Fist was now the center of a tightening noose. The Vargas promise, class vessels locking into formation with chilling precision. His secondary display flickered, an incoming transmission, unencrypted, broadcasting on every frequency. A single image, a human woman, her face scarred, her eyes hollow with a grief centuries old, and beneath her, a message in bleeding crimson text. You burned our home, we remember. Vashdor's neural spikes fired in frantic denial. This was not possible. The humans had been primitive, their technology crude, their tactics predictable. Yet here they were, emerging from the corpse of their own world, with ships that matched, no surpassed, Dralethian engineering. The scans confirmed it, reinforced hulls layered with adaptive armor, energy signatures that pulsed with controlled fury, weapons arrays that defied conventional classification, and beneath it all, the same designation, stamped into every hull like a brand. Vargas promise. Who was Varga? What had they promised? Lee exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening around his rifle. He remembered Earth, remembered the skies burning, remembered the screams, and now, finally, he remembered the words Shepard had spoken to him when they woke him from cryo. Centuries later, in the hollowed-out heart of Luna, they think they won. She had smiled then, sharp as a blade. Let's show them what winning really looks like. Draltal's comms officer turned, his voice strained. High Commander, the human fleet, their weapons, Draltal already knew. The Vargas promise wasn't just a name, it was a vow, and it was about to be kept. The silence on the Dralethian command deck was absolute. Draltal's claws flexed against the armrest of his throne, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, a reflexive attempt to shield himself from the impossible sight before him. The Vargas promise hung in the void, like a specter, its hull a patchwork of scars and fresh welds, its weapon ports glowing with a cold, deliberate light. It shouldn't exist. Humans were supposed to be extinct. A myth, a cautionary tale whispered in the halls of the galactic conclave. The tactical display pulsed with fresh data, each update more damning than the last. The human ships weren't just surviving the Dralethian bombardment, they were adapting. Their armor shimmered where plasma fire struck, dispersing the energy like water over stone. Their engines burned with a precision that defied the crude, brute force propulsion of Dralethian war barges. Vashdor's voice crackled over the command channel, his usual arrogance replaced by something far more dangerous. Fear. High Commander, their energy signatures. They're not just matching our output, they're exceeding it by orders of magnitude. Draltal didn't respond. His gaze remained locked on the central viewport, where the lead human vessel, a monstrous, angular dreadnought, slowly rotated to face them. A single phrase scrolled across the tactical feed, translated automatically by the ship's linguist. Core, we remember. Inside the Vargas promise, Corporal Jackson Lee exhaled through his teeth, the sound lost in the hum of active war systems. The neural link in his skull fed him a constant stream of data, ship positions, shield integrity, weapon trajectories. He didn't need it, he remembered. He remembered Earth's last stand, remembered the Dralethian war fleets blotting out the sky, remembered the orbital strikes turning cities to glass, remembered the silence afterward. The Vargas promise hadn't been built for revenge, it had been built for justice. Draltal's comms officer flinched as another alert blared across the deck. High Commander, their main weapon, it's charging. The dreadnought's forward array pulsed once, twice, then ignited. A beam of pure white light lanced across the void, so bright it seared afterimages into Draltal's vision. It struck the Dralethian flagship's shields and shattered them. Not overloaded, not drained. The feedback surge ripped through the ship systems, sending consoles exploding in showers of sparks. Draltal staggered, his claws digging into the deck to keep himself upright. Vashdor's voice was barely audible over the chaos. That's not possible. Their energy signature. It matches the old human supercollider arrays, but refined, weaponized. Draltal's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't just survived, they had evolved. Colonel Rebecca Shepard watched the Dralethian flagship reel from the impact, her expression unreadable. They had waited so long for this, slept in the dark, planned in the silence. Now, the galaxy would remember. She tapped a command into her console. Across the Vargas promise, secondary systems flared to life. The Dralethians had thought humanity broken. They were about to learn the truth. A broken species would have died quietly. A wounded one would have hidden. But humanity remembered. And humanity came back. Draltal's ship shuddered as another impact rocked the hull. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution. And the humans weren't just winning. They were proving a point. His claws flexed again, this time in something far older than rage. The Vargas promise wasn't a name, it was a warning. And it was too late to heed it. The Dralethian flagship molten will burned, not with the controlled fury of its forge, born reactors, but with the ragged, desperate flames of a dying beast. The once proud vessel, a titan of dark metal and molten conduits, now listed in the void, its angular armor peeled back like the carapace of some great insect caught mid-molt. Orange, red plasma vented from ruptured conduits, swirling into the black like the last breaths of a wounded god. Draltal stood at the center of his command nexus, his copper, scaled hands gripping the edges of the tactical display. The holographic projection flickered, its data corrupted by the same human weapon that had sheared through 3 of his escort cruisers in a single salvo. His secondary hearts pounded in staggered rhythm, a biological echo of the ship's failing systems. This was not war as the Dralethians understood it. War was honor. War was measured in the heat of plasma lances and the weight of forged steel. It was a contest of strength, of endurance, of the unbreakable will of the Dralethian forge, mind but the humans. They fought like vengeance given form. A new alert pulsed across the fractured display. The Vargas Promise, the human flagship, was altering course. Not to retreat, not to regroup, to close in. Draltal's spines flared involuntarily, a primal reaction to the sight. The human vessel was a nightmare of asymmetrical design, its hull a patchwork of scarred armor and retrofitted weapon mounts. It moved with a predator's patience, gliding through the wreckage of his fleet as if the void itself bent to its passage. And then the scans updated. His blood ran cold. The humans weren't just moving to engage, they were boarding. Aboard the Vargas Promise, Colonel Rebecca Shepard watched the tactical feed, with the stillness of a storm gathering at the horizon. The Dralethians had believed themselves invincible. Their ships were fortresses, their warriors bred for war. They had burned human worlds without hesitation, confident that no species could survive their wrath. They had been wrong. A soft chime sounded at her console. The boarding pods were away. She didn't need to give the order. Her soldiers knew their duty. Corporal Jackson Lee adjusted the seal of his void. Rated armor, the reinforced plating locking into place with a series of muted clicks. The HUD flared to life across his visor, painting the interior of the drop pod in stark tactical glyphs. Around him, the rest of the squad moved with the same quiet precision, checking weapons, running final diagnostics, waiting. No speeches, no grand declarations. They had waited centuries for this. The pod shuddered as its thrusters ignited, hurling them toward the wounded Dralethian flagship. Lee exhaled. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. Time to remind them. The first breach alarm screamed through the molten Wills corridors seconds before the boarding pod struck. Dralethian warriors mobilized with disciplined fury, their armored forms thundering toward the breach points. Plasma cutters flared as they prepared to carve through the human intrusion, their commanders barking orders in the guttural tones of their war tongue. Then the first pod detonated, not with fire, not with shrapnel, with light. A searing, blinding pulse of energy flooded the corridor, overloading Dralethian optics and scorching their thermal receptors. The warriors staggered, their enhanced senses, tuned for the molten forges of their homeworld, rendered useless in the face of this calculated cruelty. And then the humans moved. They came not as soldiers, but as shadows given form. Their armor absorbed light, their footfalls silent, even against the metal deck. Monomolecular blades flashed, parting Dralethian alloy like paper. Kinetic rifles barked, their rounds designed not to kill, but to shatter. Rupturing joints, fracturing armor, leaving their enemies broken but alive. Alive long enough to see. Draltal's command nexus shuddered as another explosion rocked the hull. The humans weren't just boarding, they were hunting. His claws flexed against the console. This was not a battle. This was justice, and the humans had come to collect. The Dralethian command nexus burned with the acrid stench of molten conduits and scorched metal. High Commander Draltal's claws dug into the command console, the dark alloy groaning under the pressure. His thermal receptors flickered, still recovering from the blinding pulse that had turned his warriors into stumbling, disoriented prey. The word tasted like poison. The Dralethians were conquerors. They had broken empires, shattered fleets, reduced worlds to smoldering ruins beneath the relentless heat of their forge. Born wrath, they were not prey. A shadow moved at the edge of the chamber. Draltal's spines flared, his optics straining against the flickering emergency lighting. The humans had breached the inner sanctum. He had expected them to come as warriors, clad in crude armor, screaming their defiance like the lesser species they had once been thought to be. But they did not scream. They did not even speak. They simply appeared, silent, seamless, their forms blending into the fractured darkness of his dying ship. Their armor drank the light, matte, black surfaces etched with the scars of 100 battles. Their visors glowed a muted amber, the only sign of life in their otherwise motionless advance. One of them stepped forward. Draltal recognized the insignia, a human officer. Colonel Rebecca Shepard, if the intelligence reports were correct. She moved with the precision of a predator who had already decided the hunt was over. Behind her, the others fanned out, their weapons humming with restrained energy. They are waiting. The realization sent a cold ripple through Draltal's veins. The humans were not here to slaughter. They were here to witness. Vashdor, the Dralethian scientist, staggered back from his ruined console, his copper-plated fingers twitching in distress. This is impossible, he hissed, his voice a broken rasp. Our shielding, our armor. None of it should have failed like this. Shepard tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, with a single fluid motion, she reached up and removed her helmet. The chamber fell utterly silent. Human faces were rare in the galaxy now. Most species knew them only from ancient records, fragments of a civilization long since erased. But here, now, Shepard's features were laid bare, pale skin marked with old scars, dark eyes that held neither hatred nor triumph, only certainty. You thought we were gone, she said, her voice quiet, almost conversational. You thought you had wiped us out, burned our worlds, scattered our people. Draltal's claws flexed. He had seen the records, the great purges, the orbital bombardments that had turned human colonies to glass. The Dralethian High Command had declared it a necessary cleansing, a removal of a chaotic, unpredictable variable. Shepard's gaze never wavered. But you forgot one thing, a flicker of movement behind her. Another human stepped forward, Corporal Jackson Lee, his armor still streaked with the residue of Dralethian blood. In his hands, he carried something small, a data crystal. Lee activated it. A holographic projection bloomed in the center of the chamber. An old transmission, grainy with age, the voice distorted but unmistakably human. This is Captain Elias Vance of the Earth Defense Fleet. If anyone is listening, we are the last. The Dralethians have broken our lines. They are coming for Earth. We will hold as long as we can. But if we fall, a pause, a breath. Remember us. The recording ended. Shepard's expression did not change. No one else would come for us, she said softly. So we came for you. Draltal felt the weight of those words settle over him like a funeral shroud. This was not a raid, not a desperate strike. This was vengeance, and the humans had waited a long, long time to deliver it. Outside the shattered viewports, the void burned with the wreckage of the Dralethian fleet. The humans had not just returned. They had brought the storm with them. The silence in the command chamber was absolute. Draltal's claws flexed against the dark metal of the console, the orange glow of the holographic projection casting jagged shadows across his segmented armor. The humans' words, "No one else would come for us," echoed in his skull like the tolling of some ancient forgotten bell. Vashdor, the scientist, had gone utterly still, his copper-plated cranial ridges twitching as if trying to parse the impossibility before him. The humans were supposed to be gone, erased. A cautionary tale whispered in the halls of the Dralethian war academies. How the weak, how the emotional, had been purged from the galaxy for the sake of order. Here they stood. Shepard's gaze was unreadable, her face illuminated by the dying flicker of the hologram. The transmission had been centuries old, a final plea, a last stand. And now, the humans had returned. Not as desperate survivors, not as broken refugees, but as something else entirely, something worse. Outside the shattered viewports, the void churned with the wreckage of the Dralethian fleet. Molten metal twisted in the cold vacuum, the remnants of dreadnoughts drifting like funeral pyres. The humans had not simply attacked, they had dismantled. Their weapons had not just pierced Dralethian hulls. They had unmade them, tearing through reinforced plating as if it were parchment. Lee shifted beside Shepard, his grip tightening on his rifle. The weapon was sleek, black, humming with barely restrained energy. Nothing like the crude firearms the Dralethian archives had once documented. Draltal's mind raced. The humans had been primitive, fragile. Their technology had been laughable. Chemical propellants, fission warheads, crude railguns. This was something else. Shepard took a slow step forward, her boots clicking against the deck. The sound was deliberate, measured. "You thought we were extinct," she said, her voice low. "You thought you won." Draltal's secondary heart stuttered. Shepard's lips curled, not in a smile, but in something colder, something older. "You didn't." The deck beneath them trembled. A proximity alarm blared raw discordant, and Vashdor's head snapped toward the sensor display. His voice was a rasp. "High Commander." Draltal didn't need to look. He already knew. The human fleet was moving, not retreating. Shepard turned her head slightly, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. Then, without another word, she tapped a command into her wrist display. The chamber's main holoprojector flared to life. A tactical schematic unfolded before them. The Dralethian home system, their fortress worlds, their shipyards, their orbital foundries. All of it, laid bare, and converging upon it, like a storm of knives, were the human ships. Draltal's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an attack. This was annihilation. Shepard met his gaze. "You took everything from us," she said. "Now we return the favor." The deck shook again. Harder this time. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the station, something screamed. Lee exhaled, long and slow. "Burn bright," he murmured. Outside, the void ignited. The void burned. Draltal's claws dug into the command console, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyelids flicked shut against the glare. Orange-red Dralethian plasma met the cold, relentless blue of human railgun fire, and the space between the fleets became a storm of annihilation. The human ships moved like nothing he had ever seen, not the ponderous, fortress-like advance of Dralethian dreadnoughts, nor the skittish darting of the lesser species corvettes. They flowed, a swarm of blades cutting through the dark, each vessel adjusting its trajectory with impossible precision, weaving through the wreckage of the first Dralethian battle line as if the debris were part of their strategy. Because it was, Vashdor's sensor array screamed warnings, the data scrolling too fast for even his augmented mind to parse. The humans weren't just attacking, they were dismantling. Their weapons didn't just pierce hulls, they targeted structural weak points, severing power conduits, rupturing plasma containment chambers, turning Dralethian ships into cascading failures. And then there were the boarding pods. Draltal's crest flared in instinctive revulsion as the first wave struck, not the crude, blunt entry of standard boarding craft. These were sleek, needle-like projectiles that burrowed, drilling through armor plating before detonating inward in a spray of monomolecular shrapnel. The feeds from the lower decks were already flickering with screams, distorted by interference. Human soldiers moved in the dark. Corporal Lee's voice crackled over the comms, calm, almost conversational. "Burn bright." The station shuddered. Shepard hadn't moved. She stood at the center of the command deck, her gaze locked on the holographic display, as the human fleet carved deeper into Dralethian space. Their trajectory was clear now. Not just the military hubs, not just the shipyards. Draltal's blood turned to ice. This wasn't revenge. This was a message. Vashdor's voice was a rasp, his vocal cords strained by the acrid smoke filling the chamber. They're not stopping. They're not even slowing down. Draltal knew. The humans had no interest in negotiation, no desire for surrender. They had come from the dark with one purpose, and they would not be denied. Outside, the last of the Dralethian defensive line shattered under a concentrated volley of relativistic slugs. A dreadnought split apart along its molten seams, its core detonating in a silent, furious bloom of orange. Red light. Shepard finally turned to face him. "You thought we were gone," she said. "You thought you had erased us." Her gauntleted hand clenched. The hologram shifted. A transmission, old, grainy, flickering with age. A human city, burning. A sky choked with Dralethian drop pods. The screams were barely audible beneath the static, but they were there. And then, cutting through the noise, a single phrase, repeated in a dozen languages, 100 dialects, 1,000 voices. No one else would come, so we did. The deck beneath them screamed as the human boarding teams breached the final bulkhead. Lee stepped forward, his rifle humming with charged energy. Draltal understood. Then, this was not war. This was justice. The last thing he saw was the muzzle flare, blinding white against the dark. Far beyond the dying station, the human fleet pressed onward, their engines burning like fallen stars. The galaxy would remember, and it would fear.